Welcome, welcome, welcome.
A notable welcome to all you music lovers.
To something that I like to call
Journey
to the stage. It's all about music.
Music.
And more.
music.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back
Your host. Your host. And our dad.
Brian.
Fraser.
Hey, it's Trevor.
Chip.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to Journey to the Stage, and thanks for tuning in today. This podcast really is for music lovers. Not only do you get to hear from musicians and artists that you might know, but you can discover new artists that you don't know and hear some great music. The truth is, there is so much incredible music out there, but with radio dying, finding new music that resonates with you, I know can be quite a challenge. That's why I love to have artists on like my guest today. Before we jump into our chat, please consider leaving a kind review or giving a rating, sharing this with your friends. As an indie podcaster with no marketing department, you doing those things goes a long way, and thank you for everybody who's done so far in helping Journey to the Stage to reach the level it's reached. I'm very, very much appreciative. So my guest today is a very talented singer and songwriter whose band has toured with bands like the Wallflowers and Jayhawks, Frank Turner, the old 97s. Somebody I've gotten to see twice, and we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. He's the youngest co-writer on a song with Bob Dylan, and what in the world? Can't wait to hear about that. And much, much more to talk about. So it's my pleasure to welcome Wisconsin's own Trapper Schoepp. Trapper, thanks for joining me, man.
And it's my pleasure to be here. And your introduction sounded like so on the money. It almost sounded like one of those ads that pops up on a podcast or something. I was like, what? Am I listening to a pre-recorded intro? You have a voice for, not voice for radio, voice for podcasting.
Really funny you say that. So when I saw you guys, and we'll talk more about when I've seen you guys live, but when you were playing with the Jayhawks in Solano Beach, this is kind of funny. I wanted to introduce the Jayhawks. You know, they're one of my favorite bands. And so I got there really early. I saw Gary, he was walking to get something to eat. So I was just walking with him like, hey, I would love to introduce you guys. And he looked at me and he's like, you know, it's kind of an odd request. I know. He's like probably trying to figure me out like, well, he's like, well, you do have a good radio voice. I said, yeah, it just would be kind of cool. You know, just think about it.
Gary
like,
said that too. It's not just me.
He did. Yeah. Which was really cool. So the funny thing is, of course, you probably wouldn't remember this, but I was there with my brother. I got there early, got seat, not seat. It was a standing only venue, standing right against the stage. I love to be right in the front. And you guys come out. It's dark. No one introduced you. And I'm like, what the heck? So you were literally like 2 or 3 feet away from me. I'm like, what? No one's going to introduce you? And you said, I know, right? And then you said, you reached out your hand. You said, you want to do it? And I was like, what? And so you pulled me up on stage and I'm like, please welcome, I think I actually said from Minneapolis, from Minnesota.
That's fair. I mean, I was born in Red Wing, Minnesota. So
yeah,
I'm down with that.
Yeah. And I'm like, Trapper Schoepp, and everyone goes crazy. And I jump off the stage and watch the rest of the show. And it's so funny because I looked at my brother. I'm like, dude, did you snap a picture? What?
I think we need to bring you all over the country, maybe just to do the intros, or maybe we could just do like a pre-recorded thing like Bob Dylan does over like he does the like classical music, and then someone says, written off as a has-been by the end of the 80s,
wow.
Disappeared into a haze of substance abuse over like classical music. Then they play it and Bob comes out. But yeah, band intros are kind of cool when they work.
Yeah, I just thought it was kind of a ripoff for you guys just to walk out there without nobody announcing you. So
well, thank you. I'm glad we can reconnect again.
Well, that was really cool because I think it was your tour manager after gave me a CD, and there's a tour poster, and it's still it's right above where you walk into my house from my garage, from inside my garage.
Nice. I don't even have one of those.
Yeah. Well, I think I know where I can get you one if you're
sweet.
So we talked last week, just kind of gearing up for our time together. You had been called to jury duty. So did you get the call? Did you get the boot? What happened?
Oh my God. Yeah. So the Milwaukee County Courthouse is really beautiful old structure. and I
Nice.
wandered all around it for an hour before actually being put into the little room. Waited 4 hours, went to lunch, and came back, waited 2 more hours,
Oh boy.
and I got brought into the courtroom at last. And the judge goes around and asks everybody a few questions: occupation, marital status, et cetera, et cetera. And of
Yeah.
course, everyone in the room uses that as an opportunity to say how they have a conflict with the case because their brother's a substance abuse counselor, or their
Oh,
sister's a cop, or this or that and the other. And,
yeah.
I just say, oh, and I'm a musician. And then the guy says, what kind of music? And I said, folk music. And I didn't get picked to be on the jury. And I was
Wow.
kind of bummed because I'd come so far only to be let go, you know?
Well, and
And
you
so it was
invested all the
like,
time.
it was me and a pastor walking out of jury duty, and we didn't get picked. And I was thinking, where did it all go wrong with us? A pastor and a folk musician can't get on jury duty. I would have thought we were the voice of the people. Yeah, it was so funny. Like everyone tried to get out of it, and I just played it totally straight, and I was the one that got let go. So, but I would have loved to do it, and I think it really is a good experience for people to have.
Well, at least now you have a setup for a good joke. A folk singer and a pastor walk into a bar.
I'll have to work on the punchline, but
Yeah, I don't know what that would be, but I'm sure it would be great. So when this episode releases, your new album will be out. And we're going to spend some time talking about that, Siren Songs. So, and it's absolutely awesome. I can't wait to dig into that. We're going to be playing a couple of cuts from that as we walk through our chat today. But what I want to do before then is just kind of do a flyover of your pathway up to this point. You really started making music really young. What was it for you that kind of put that fire in your belly, so to speak, to want to pursue music on a professional level?
well, I think when you're a kid, you do everything to the extremes. Especially in my case, I was, really into basketball, and got the Kobe Bryant jersey, and
Nice.
my brother Tanner got the Carl Malone, and then we'd face off in our basement, and then it was BMX biking, and we built a half pipe in the backyard, and then I ended up herniating a disc in my back,
Ooh,
among other really traumatic injuries, which is for a whole nother podcast. But I went to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, and the surgeon said something along the lines of, I hate to break it to you, Trap, but you're going to have surgery. And on the way home, my mother, bless her, love you, Mom, got me a Martin orchestra model guitar as
wow.
sort of a, you kind of messed your life up a bit there. Try this instead. So I got into music, I guess, to the extremes, as I did with other activities and pursuits. When you're a kid, you get obsessed with things, and fell in love with folk music. Started going to shows at this little place called the Blue Moon in Red Wing, Minnesota, watching slide guitar players, folk singers, Celtic bands, cover bands, everything in between, and just absorbed as much of that as I could. Ended up making a little album called A Change in the Weather, which I occasionally hear about people selling for absurd amounts of money on eBay or Amazon. And let me just tell you, I got plenty of these in my basement. So if you need to scrounge through my amateur high school recordings, I can provide that for you. You don't have to go through the big corporations to get it. But yeah, and then I heard Bob Dylan. That, of course, was a major shock to my system, especially because he grew up not far from where I did. And I thought that was really interesting that this guy who's lived such a remarkable life, had such a remarkable career, had grown up just a few hours from me.
I had the killer pleasure of seeing Bob Dylan and Paul Simon tour together, which are two of my musical heroes. And
Oh,
it
wow.
was quite a show. Quite a show. Really, really loved it.
I don't know if I could handle that.
Yeah, it was so much pure, beautiful music. Yeah, it was quite an evening. That's funny that you're a Kobe Bryant fan. I grew up in LA, a huge Laker fan, and I got to meet Kobe once, and well, until security chased me away.
When you're a kid,
But
you're a fan of every basketball player. Let's be real. I
yeah,
mean,
right.
I was into it all, and I still dabble. I'm a big Milwaukee Bucks fan, obviously
Nice.
being here in Milwaukee, and I think they have such a special team. And it's small market, underdog, flyover country, and we ended up winning it all. So go figure. And I feel like it's a really cool story too. The team.
When I was really into basketball, they weren't really a team to reckon with. But so that's
Hmm.
why I love when you see another franchise come up and say, "Hey, we're here too." Now, your brother Tanner, is he pretty much always been with you musically? Is that something that he pursued with you, kind of right from the get go?
Yes, he's the editor in chief for sure, and co-pilot, bassist, beautiful voice, and I think a huge asset to
Awesome.
my whole being. Yeah, Tanner, shout out to him.
Do you remember the first stage that you played on?
Well, I did perform at a open mic. Tanner drove me, supported me in Red Wing, Minnesota at some sketchy bar. And I probably played a Bob Dylan cover and a Dave Matthews Band cover or something of that nature, and then maybe one of my own. And then we played all these places, little coffee houses along the Mississippi River Valley in Red Wing, the Blue Moon, like I mentioned, this place called the Oak Center General Store, which is old timey organic farm. And they also have a stage upstairs above the general store. And I always thought if I played the Oak Center General Store, that was it for me. I mean, I thought that was my Grand Old Opry. That
Wow.
was my town hall,
Yeah.
Carnegie Hall. And it's funny how your perspective shifts. But I think after going through the pandemic, I have really started over a bit in terms of where my gratitude is at. And I'm just always happy to perform these days. And I think I had to do some recalibrating in my mind. And it was actually quite nice to have a couple of years away from the grind of music. Of course, there were a lot of lows, as there were for everyone, but I think overall it helped reboot some things with me.
Well, it almost makes sense, and I know a lot of bands and artists that have had to go through the same thing because the landscape has changed so much. Even venues that were once reliable, you can play there every leg of a tour, every stretch you wanted to play, and a lot of those places are gone now. So that recalibration, I think, has taken place throughout the music world, so to speak. So
I think it's every world though too. To be fair, I think a lot of people's careers have shifted and a lot has been said about how it affected the music industry, of course. But I think that can be said for so many industries that aren't getting Rolling Stone, Billboard, New York Times pieces about it.
no, I think you're absolutely right. So those early days, what bands and artists were you really into? Obviously, you mentioned Dylan, but what other songwriters, what other artists really kind of captured your ear?
Okay, well, I'll start with a few that folks probably don't know. A singer from Rochester, Minnesota named Cam Waters was a very accomplished steel guitar player and folk singer,
Mhm.
RIP. There's a really cool band up there, kind of Irish folky in Minneapolis called Boiled in Lead. They were really cool to go see shows.
Mhm.
But bigger artists, a bit of the standard Americana singer songwriter fare. Wilco, Bruce Springsteen. You remember going into Borders to get CDs and stuff?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so my mom had gotten me like a $25 gift card for my birthday. And I think I got the Wilco, a Ghost is Born CD, maybe a Dylan CD, and then I had like $7 left over. and I saw CDs that said "Closing Time." I love that song, and I picked that up and went home with it, and it was Tom Waits' "Closing Time," not Semisonic.
Oh, interesting.
That was a blow to the system, but then I picked up that Tom Waits CD maybe a year later and got really into that. But my dad always had kind of cool music playing, like Tom Petty or Fleetwood Mac or Harry Chapin. That was really kind of fun stuff to listen to, not like bad stuff that you hate your parents playing.
Early on, a lot of artists play covers and stuff like that because it helps keep an audience. Because an audience for an unknown artist, it's going to be a challenge to play some originals. But at what point did you start making that transition from, maybe playing other people's stuff to mixing your own tunes and kind of continuing on that spectrum over to, stuff that you were writing?
I think pretty early on, you kind of try to write your own stuff.
I was a kid of the 80s and everybody was in a band back then and everybody was doing covers. And my thought was, man, you're never going to sound as good as the original. We're a bunch of high schoolers.
Yeah, Led Zeppelin cover, like Ray Charles, or like Beatles covers. It's always like the things you should never be covering that you end up, taking a stab at.
But you try.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's all a part of the musical growth and development.
But I think that's why there's so much wisdom in making your own stuff because you can't be compared to the original because you are the original. So I think it's really
Hmm.
cool. But also it's gutsy. There's a little bit of a risk there because if people aren't into it, then, you're not going to have anybody sitting there listening to you. So that's really cool, though, that you were early on able to, kind of work into your own music and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, with me too, think about I was going from jumping around on half pipes on a big BMX bike. So writing my own songs, the fear of that is really not even, comparable to riding around a BMX bike and flying through the sky. So I think when you're young, you do have less fear.
Throw caution to the wind, as they say.
Hmm.
Yeah, cool. This is a great place to drop in a song. As we were chatting, we talked about playing the Cliffs of Dover. This is the first song on the album, and man, it just grabs you from the beginning. Give us a little bit of background to this song before we give it a spin.
Yeah, I think I was watching the news like crazy in the last few years. Who wasn't? And
Hmm.
then when we brought home a bunch of troops from the Middle East, it seemed like a few months went by, and then we were shipping weapons to Ukraine and teetering on World War III. And I have so many frustrations with America, but a big one is how we've treated the men and women that come home from wars.
I heard somebody say once that you judge a nation based on how it treats its returning soldiers, and which goes to really what you're saying. Sometimes we don't do that very well, and I'm
Mhm.
glad to hear that that has worked its way into the song. So let's give this a roll. This is Cliffs of Dover by Trapper Schoepp on his brand new album, Siren Songs.
Left turn, right turn, too many ways to go. You spawn out and froze like a doe in the snow. You're too scared of dying to ever be living. You have no sins to ever be forgiven. Whoa, whoa, whoa. The bullets blow. Whoa, brother, don't you know we were bound to lose? And now you're lying in bed with them Baghdad blues. God's out for the season. Demons got a reason. Doing the high crimes in the misdemeanors. Whoa, whoa, whoa. The bullets blow. Whoa, whoa. But there will always be bluebirds over the white, white cliffs. what's left in the stable, and your best ideas lay dead on the table. We lost him to their dirty little war. Turn off the television, wonder what 20 years were for. Whoa, the bullets blow. Whoa, there will always be bluebirds over the white, white cliffs, cliffs of Dover. There will always be bluebirds over the white, white cliffs, cliffs of Dover. There will always be bluebirds over the white, white cliffs, cliffs of Dover. There will always be bluebirds over the white, white cliffs, cliffs of Dover.
Dropper, this is really a killer song. I mean, you can't listen to this song and be still. It moves from the very, very beginning. Tell us a little bit about how you got to record, where you recorded. It's a very storied place. Share with us a little bit about that.
Well, shout out right away to our mutual buddy, John Jackson, who
Yeah, John's the best.
is not only a fantastic musician with bands such as the Jayhawks and a producer, but worked for Sony Legacy for years, and I do believe helped get Loretta Lynn all set up at the Cash Cabin, Johnny Cash's historic Cash Cabin. Started out as a bit of a hunting shack for him and his buddies. And then in his later years, he began recording there. Some of the albums he did with Rick Rubin were recorded there. So he did like Hurt there on those grounds. The Man Comes Around, all those.
Wow.
But so we recorded there, and it was an absolute thrill, to say the least. But recording Cliffs of Dover, we'd oftentimes get together in the main live room of the Cash Cabin, and I would just play the musicians a song. And we wanted to record the album mostly live, or see how much we could get live. And we'd finished tracking for the day, and Pat and John kind of said, "Oh, let's show us what you might work on tomorrow." And so I got in the live room and I played them Cliffs of Dover, and musicians being musicians. Let's try it. Let's just like dive into it for a second, right? And what you hear on the record, I think, is the third or fourth take. And yeah, and I think a lot of the vocal that was done is live, the guitars, drums, bass. We overdubbed a few things, but what you hear is Pat Sansone playing the acoustic guitar, and then John Jackson on the mandolin.
Yeah.
And we were really just figuring out the song. There really is something to recording live, where you kind of play for your life. No click track. The drummer should be a human click track if he's a good one.
Agreed. Yep.
And Yeah, I'm really proud of that song because we were able to get it so quick. And oftentimes the best material comes quick.
I agree. And sometimes you can produce something to death, and to catch it raw, live,
I've done it.
organically.
I've done it.
Yeah, every artist, because we're susceptible. We want things to be perfect. It's our heart is there, but you tweak something, and pretty soon you've got Frankenstein as opposed to some beautiful piece of work. And it's an easy thing to fall into. Did you do all of the writing on your own? So did you come to the Cash Cabin with, all of these songs in
Yeah,
tow
so we had
already?
14 songs in 7 days, and which was
Wow.
a bit of a task, but we thought, well, let's try, you know. But yeah, I went down there with a notebook full of songs and had sent them around before, but truthfully, things really changed quite a bit once everyone got playing. But it was really a wild experience. I don't know a better way to put it. Recording in Johnny's old stomping grounds. Pat was
Yeah.
playing June's piano. I was playing
Wow.
Johnny's 1930s shit kicker guitar. Quinn, our guitarist, played like Luther Perkins's telly. It was wild. I'd sit back and listen to mixes and Johnny's old rocking chair that he carved JRC into with a knife. I
Wow.
mean, what's more Americana than that? People throw around that term a lot, but it was really a cool experience.
I can only imagine. So is that cabin, is it still, fairly remote, or is it built up around, these days? What's it like out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's in Hendersonville, Tennessee,
Hmm.
so it's pretty rural. But what's really funny is that every single day there, we called it keeping up with the Kashes, like keeping up with the Kardashians. Like something funny always happened. One day I heard these helicopters buzzing right above the cabin. Like you could feel the vibrations of it. And I thought, well, first thought was, okay, we can't record right now. What's happening? And then the engineer said, oh, they're probably just passing by. Turns out there was an intruder on the property, some guy
Oh,
who was trying to, no pun intended, cash fake checks, him and his buddies, jumped out of a car because they were being chased, ran onto the cash property, and all of a sudden we have ATVs, we have artillery, we have helicopters. They picked the wrong land to hide on. I made everyone that was in my party get into the cabin, locked all the doors, and what's wild is we ended up recording a whole song. 7 Mile Fair is the name of that song,
oh yeah.
and the line in it, and the band plays on. I thought was so fitting at that moment. Yeah, that was in terms of recording stories. That was unique for
That is a
sure.
unique one. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So producer wise, you talked about how you've got John Jackson there, of course, as you mentioned, from the Jayhawks, and he produced for the Jayhawks as well, not only toured
Hmm.
with them and stuff, but also having Pat Sanson on there from Wilco, another one of my favorite bands. I would imagine you got to know John from when you guys were touring with them. Is that right? When you were touring with the Jayhawks, or did
Well,
you know him before?
this is actually funny, and I pieced this together in the last year. I reminded John of this, but I met John because I started playing at these open jam sessions that Craig Jarrett Johnson of Golden Smog had
Oh
in New
yeah, yeah,
York.
yeah.
So John would always show up to these. And then we were doing a gig at the Hazelton Rehab Center in Minneapolis, and a couple of my bandmates couldn't do it, and I was panicked. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, who's a guy that can really just kind of pick up and play on anything? We joke a jobber, we call that. But I called John Jackson, flew him in from New York, and he ended up filling in with us, and then filling in with the Jayhawks after us. And I don't know. John will have to tell me if that was the first time he did a show with them or not. I can't remember. But
If I remember correctly, when he was on my podcast, again, my very first guest, he went with a buddy to go see Gary performing a solo show somewhere. and really asked if he and his buddy could open for Gary before
Oh,
Gary's set.
nice. Cool.
And they started talking, and he said, "Oh, well, maybe you can sit in. Do you know any of my songs?" And John said, "Yeah, I do, actually." And Gary said, "Well, which ones?" And it's kind of funny because John looked at him and said, "All of
All
them."
of them. Yeah. Oh my God.
So he ended up sitting in with Gary that night, and that's kind of really obviously opened up a whole other world for him and them, and pretty cool
Well,
story.
what makes Jackhammer a huge asset is that not only is he a musical encyclopedia with a mandolin or a violin or an
Hmm.
acoustic guitar in his hands, he's an encyclopedia on the business and the archival and the like he can wear both hats, which
Yeah, right.
I have never met someone in the music industry that kind of can flex all those
Hmm.
different muscles
Yeah.
simultaneously. I mean, truly, he's like the sweetest and smartest guy. And, I don't know if
Yeah.
he'll hear this, but love you, John. You've been so supportive and kind to me and my brother throughout the years. You know what's funny? Here's a really quick John Jackson story that speaks to his character. John has been guesting in our shows in New York City since God 2014. He'd just show up. Never would ask for anything. He'd just
Yeah.
always show up and play and be a good time. But one day we did a gig at like Webster Hall or somewhere opening for someone. And the next day he said, "Oh, pop by my office and say bye on your way out." So we pop by the Sony office building and he walks out with a bag full of Chris Christopherson box sets,
Oh,
Beatles,
wow.
Elvis, etc., etc., etc. And then a Hofner bass guitar, which is actually
What?
sitting right next to me, and just gives it to Tanner. No case, which I thought was like the funniest thing ever. He's like, "Here you go." And yeah, he is just really a sweet guy. So glad you know him and have had him on the show.
Well, I mean, I would say he's been very kind and generous to me as well. When I had the idea of starting a podcast, I reached out to him. He didn't know me. He said, "Hey, I'm starting this thing. I'd love to have you on, talk about Jayhawks and stuff like that." And he said, "Sure, why not?" And he, I was green. I was really trying to figure out even how this whole thing works. And he was so complimentary and encouraging. Like, I listened back to that very first episode, and it still makes me kind of tear up. I'm like, he took the time to really encourage me at the end. And I just thought it wasn't necessary, but I think I needed it more than I realized I needed it. You know what I mean?
Well,
Because
that's great.
you're doing something that's new, and you don't know if you're even halfway good at it. And he was just very, very kind. And that's really cool that you get to work with him. And Pat too. You've got guys from two bands that are really seminal in that Americana space. So it's super, super cool. I love the album cover, and I know that, and just doing a little bit of reading, that's taken place, that picture is taken in a pretty cool body of water. And there's a story behind that. Share that, because I think it's actually super cool.
Well, the story is that we came down to the cabin, and the first person I met was Joseph Cash.
Wow.
He unfolds this harmonium organ for us, which is old, they use it on the battlefield like a pump organ. So they could
Oh,
hold
okay.
church
Yeah. Right.
services, and it's on a lot of kind of Irish folk music as well.
Hmm.
But him and I just kind of hit it off. And he ended up having a camera around for the whole sessions and engineered it, took black and white photography the whole time. And so we
That's so
have
cool.
so many cool photos that we used in the album art and we'll share as well. We're down there and I was kind of thinking, well, what do we do for an album cover? And then Joseph one day said, come with me, come with me. I got this idea. And because I told him the album name was Siren Songs, so it'd be cool to
Hmm.
involve a body of water. And he goes out in a canoe and has me sit kind of in the shore line, my feet kind of in the water with a
Hmm.
stool. And you can just see the reflection just right. And he had to set it up just so. I mean, with film, It's the same with, he used old black and white film. Can't be too bright. The sun has to be just in the right spot. And to get that reflection, he had to go out in a canoe to get that shot. I was told that that body of water, kind of Johnny would go read letters from people like Bob Dylan, and, to protect their correspondence, he would read the letter, stash that in his brain, and crumple up the letter, throw it in.
Wow.
Go to the fishes. But yeah, I thought that was really kind of crazy.
That is really interesting. So he would stand out there, maybe on the shore, read that letter, and because he wouldn't want others, for archival purposes or whatever, he wanted to protect that. He would read it, maybe rip it up and throw it in the water, huh? That's so fascinating.
That's what I was told. Yeah. That was, just one of the crazy stories I was told. Not all of them are set to public, but
Right.
that was really affecting. That was one of the first things I heard when I got there.
Wow.
Because they have a mantle there as well that's really cool that everyone signs. And it was so funny. I didn't want to sign the mantle. I really didn't. Because it was everyone from like Dolly Parton to Snoop Dogg on the mantle, people that had been through. I'm like, I'm not mantle worthy, not sponge worthy. But yeah, in the end, I actually signed like underneath the mantle on the bottom of it.
That's super cool. Boy, if those walls could speak, huh? I bet they'd have some stories. Yeah. Well, let's listen to another song. We're going to listen to The Fool, another really great song. What can you tell us about that? Then we'll give it a spin.
Oh, I'm glad you liked that one.
I love it.
That was actually the first song I wrote for the album.
Oh, really?
And that descending guitar line, truthfully, it was just me figuring out the shapes on an open-tuned acoustic guitar.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I was just figuring out the shapes and going up and down the neck. And then the song is a bit of a conversation between the narrator and himself. Nice. About not taking love for granted and opening himself up to it.
Very, very cool. Let's listen. This is The Fool from Siren Songs by Trapper Schoepp. Man, this song is insanely catchy. Very, very catchy. It's got that hook is just so well done. One of the things that has really struck me about this album, and if I haven't said it, I truly think that this is your best work to date. And I've listened to all of your albums, at least those that are available publicly. I don't know if I have the one that's down in your basement.
Well, if you're gonna have me on your podcast, you have to say that anyway, right?
I don't think I've actually even said that to any artist I've had on.
Oh, thanks, man. Well, I think it's because we went in there and we just bashed it out. I mean, the songs, I think it was like Bob Dylan who said something like, if you have a really good song, the production doesn't matter as much, but
Hmm.
I don't know. I think you know, it does because you can really overcook things, and we didn't
Yeah,
overcook
sure.
anything on this because we didn't have the time to. We didn't have the money to. We had to just go in and knock it out. 14 songs in 7 days, gangbusters, Working in the confinements of a certain time and place can
Yeah,
really shape a record.
absolutely. Well, absolutely. And sometimes having too much time,
Oh
there's
my
a danger
God,
in that too.
that'll kill you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the advantage of having two. Well, one, you're an experience, you've done enough recording on your own. So you're not green, but to have guys like John and Pat in there with you who know music as well and bring a lot to the table, I'm sure that really helped to keep things moving. Now, I would think with having two producers in the room, if that doesn't work, that could really be disastrous because you've got two guys that could potentially be pulling in different directions, but they knew each other.
Luckily, we're all friends. We're all friends. So, I mean, that helps. John and Pat were sort of a dream team. It was really, really nice and fun. Uh, making records can be stressful, but this record was so much fun to make. There was never really a struggle anywhere with it.
Well, one of the many things I love about Siren Songs is the variety. I mean, if you look at songs like Eliza, it's like an old ballad, this lost love. And then you've got Devil's Kettle where it's got this real bluesy kind of swanky feeling to it. And the I think it's the closing song In Return, very piano driven. And so this is just me being perfectly honest. Your vocal delivery on that song is off the charts beautiful. I don't know what it is. There's a strength in the way you place that in your voice, but there's also vulnerability and
Hmm.
an intimacy that comes out in that, which I think is very, very special. And I'm not gonna lie, man, I
The
love
reason
it.
it sounds good is because I was standing about 10 feet from Pat playing June's piano, and we were just looking at each other, and it was very in the moment. There's no explanation other than that. We were feeling it.
So this is what I think I really want to stress to people who are maybe unfamiliar with your music, that sometimes, especially in with streaming and everything, we'll find a song we like and we'll stream it and we'll play it and we'll put it away and move on to something else. I really want to encourage people to spend time with this album. It is a wonderful collection of songs and play it top to bottom. And because it's a very cohesive album and it's very well done, beautifully written. I don't rate albums often, but this is a 5-star album. 5 out of 5 stars for me. I really loved it, and I've only listened to it through 2.5 times, and I'm waiting to finish my third time through. So I hope people really experience it as an album as opposed to a song here or a song there, because each song has its own feel, tells its own story, and it does create a wonderfully cohesive listening experience. So I hope people kind of spend some time with it.
I think we live in the age of short attention spans. We all
Hmm.
are, a victim of the digital age.
Yeah.
But there is something about diving into a whole album and having a listen.
As I mentioned, I've been a huge fan of the Jayhawks for so long. And when I got to see you when you were touring on Run Engine Run, I think it was 2015, if I remember correctly. I mean, I saw the band, both bands, you guys in the Jayhawks, of course, at the Fillmore in San Francisco.
Oh, that was a wild show. I jumped off the
Yes,
drum set at the end and really
I
like
remember.
jumped jumped high.
Yes, you
I
did.
felt that the next day, no doubt. But I was at the
Well,
Fillmore, so I was like, was amped up, you know.
well, I remember.
Had to pay my respects.
Yes, well, that's such a historic place. And that was my first time seeing you. Then a couple days later, you guys were down in Solano Beach, just above San Diego. And when I talked with you that night, you're like, and I told you I was at the Fillmore show, and you're like, so you saw my jump? I'm like, yeah. You're like, yeah, I'm still feeling it.
That could have went so poorly.
You've got some energy on stage, man.
I'm not jumping anymore, though. I hung that up.
Well, with a herniated disc repair, yeah, that's probably. Well, I know you're getting ready to head to Europe. Is this thing where you're doing on your own acoustic? Are you taking the full band? Like, what's going on with that?
Yeah, so I'm going over there first with Jesse Malin, and so that will be just me and mandolin player Carter, and then we'll probably go back to Europe in at some point
Very
with the full
cool.
band. We are signed with a Swedish record label called Rootsy, and then in America with a label called Grand Phony. So we have a bit of a good setup there.
So one thing, just going back to when you guys toured with the Jayhawks, and you guys got to come out every night at the end of their set and sing with them on Until You Came Along. Yeah.
Yeah, that is such a beautiful song. God.
Yeah, I told John that's like the perfect song to send an
Agree.
audience out into the crowd. And,
Yeah, that is a beautiful tune.
it is a great one.
Golden Smog tune. And there's actually a really funny video online of Halloween night in Ohio. We ended the tour with the Jayhawks, and I had on a weird outfit. Gary had on a weird outfit. We like tore each other's shirts off on stage. Nice. I had like a weird mustache, but yeah, we've had some fun times with them. They're just a great band. I'm gonna listen to the Jayhawks when we're done here.
I'm a regular listener, and I love the fact that you guys got to be on the live recording because that Belly Up show was recorded and released.
Oh yeah,
pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
Kind of as we get close to wrapping things up, one of the things I read as I was preparing is that you're the youngest artist to share a co-writing title with Bob Dylan. I mean, what the heck? You got to tell us the story because that is pretty darn awesome.
Yeah, so when Bob Dylan was 20 years old, he wrote a song about Wisconsin the morning he began work on his first studio album with John Hammond in New York. And he brought it into the studio, I would presume, and it didn't make the cut on his first album. And then it ended up in the closet of his roommate at the time in New York City. And in 2017, that roommate put up the 2 sheets of lyrics about Wisconsin up for auction, $30,000. I didn't have that kind of dough to spend on 2 sheets of paper. But I thought, how about I finish the song instead? I'm from Wisconsin, folk singer, Dylan fan. So I finished the song, added music to it, edited some of his lyrics. He called Wauwatosa in the song Wow Wow Toaster, which was really funny. Nice. And then added a chorus to it, on Wisconsin, calling me that way, on Wisconsin. I think I'm going to stay. Nice. So I added that, added music to it. Through a series of Hail Mary passes, it ended up on the Dylan desk. And I do believe he checked it out and granted me the publishing rights with him. And that was one of the most crazy experiences of my life. I was at Whole Foods and I got an email while I was scooping the couscous, dropped the scooper and just like in sheer joy, ran around the grocery store multiple times buying anything I'd ever wanted. It was such a victory lap. I mean, it is really a surreal story. Like you can't write it
Yeah.
better. I mean, try telling that to the kid that saw Bob Dylan when he was 17 at a baseball field in Madison, Wisconsin, that you're going to publish a song with that guy someday and it's going to be about Wisconsin, weirdly enough. You know, you
That
like
is
can't
such a
make that
trip.
shit up. You cannot. So,
What a trip.
what a trip. Yeah, what a long, strange trip it's been.
Man. And all while you were scooping the couscous, which just,
Yep.
just gives it that extra. That's a song waiting to be written. Next album.
Maybe that's a song
Next
for
album.
you.
Scooping the couscous. Well,
Yeah.
I'll,
We'll
I'll,
have a co-write with that.
yes, I am so, I need some, I could use some street cred. So I'm down with it. Well, awesome, man. So let's talk about what is next. So album's out, you're heading to Europe. Are you guys going to be hitting the road here in the States after you get back, or what's that looking
Yes,
like?
so we will be doing an East Coast tour. So yeah, we're really excited. I live for playing live. Such a privilege to be able
Hmm.
to stand on a stage and tell your story.
Where's the best place for people to keep up with tour dates, with news, to buy merch? You got some place you can direct people to?
Yeah, we have all sorts of merch. We also have garden seeds. I'm selling my own. We have like tomato, sunflower, morning glory, carrots, etc., etc., etc.
How did I not see these on your website? I don't know.
Well,
I saw
they
the
might not be
t-shirts.
there right now, but
Oh,
we'll
okay.
be fully stocked again in a couple months. And those are called
Nice.
Schoepp seeds, and those are organic and GMO free. Go to my website, trappershop.com, and you'll find the stuff.
And I'll put all the links too in the show notes so people can just scroll down the bottom of the episode and people can just click on it and get into that. So before we wrap, thought we should have a little bit of fun, and we're going to play something called Trapper's Favorite Things. I didn't warn you about this, so
Okay.
this is going to be fresh. So I'm going to say something, and you just have to tell me what your favorite of that is. I'm so curious. We're going to
Favorite.
learn a lot about you.
Cool.
Pretty easy. All right. So, what's your favorite movie?
It would be a Coen Brothers movie.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I would say Fargo or Big Lebowski. I'm not going to choose between my two favorite children.
All right. I'll let that. And I could see that there's some regional references there. What
Oh,
about
yeah.
favorite book?
Favorite book? That is tough. Let me think. You know what is a really good book? It's probably not my favorite book, but my favorite book on songwriting, and I'm looking at it now. It's called Songwriters on Songwriting. And it's
Ooh.
just a book full of songwriters like Randy Newman, Warren Zevon, Dylan, all talking about their process. So that's probably my favorite music book.
Well, and you talked about writing from another perspective. I mean, who's better at that than Randy Newman? I
I
mean,
know,
the
yeah.
use of a narrator, the guy was genius. Genius at it. All right. Favorite TV show? You did make a Seinfeld reference in our chat. So
Well, let me just do favorite TV show right now. These are hard questions, man.
these are.
Like these are
This is
hard questions.
this is high level
So
and it's prime entertainment too.
yeah, there's a really great show I just finished. It's like a total BBC old person British show that takes place in Cornwall, and it's called Doc Martin. Have you heard of this show?
I have heard of the Boots, but not the show. All right. So favorite meal.
My partner Ella is cooking a bunch of traditional Chinese food. She is doing a lot with all these different Szechuan peppers that make your tongue and lips kind of numb. And
Which is, I think, what Szechuan means. It means numb lips and tongue,
oh,
I think.
cool, right on. Well,
I'm kidding.
she's making some magic happen in this kitchen. Yeah, anything she's been cooking in that wheelhouse, Brian, like is some serious flavor town.
Well, I'm getting in the car after this. It'll take me a
Yeah,
bit. I'm in Central California, but
come on over.
all right. So this one, I want to know what your favorite animal is, but I don't mean like lion or giraffe.
Leroy,
Or
come
like
here.
I want
Leroy, come.
a specific animal like
My
this.
dog's gonna come.
Oh,
Boston Terrier. Leroy, come here. In the jungle, the mighty jungle, the lion sleeps tonight.
nice.
In the jungle, the mighty jungle, the lion sleeps tonight.
That is a great duet. That is
There you
beautiful.
go.
Is that the dog that's with you on Primetime Illusions?
That is Ollie. He's another Boston Terrier. He's like the OG Boston in my life. But
Oh,
Leroy
nice.
is the little fella here now with me. Come here, buddy.
Next album. I
Yeah.
feel a duet coming on with
Something.
you guys.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I'd like to see that dog scoop the couscous. is- Well, okay, here's the last one. This one you're probably gonna hate me for even asking. So I'm okay. I
ready.
could deal with the hate. Favorite album, man.
Favorite album?
House is on Fire. You can only grab one album. Which one are you grabbing?
This Time Out of Mind box set just came out, the Bob Dylan album.
Oh yeah.
So right now I've been enjoying that album. But I do appreciate the gun to the head questions, Brian, because that's something like I would always used to do with friends. They hated it, but here we are. I'm loving it.
You get to see a different side of people. You know what I mean? So this is how you get to the real root of a person. Man, well, Trapper, it's been a blast. I can't thank you enough. I've really enjoyed chatting with you today, and thank you for your time, man.
This has been fun. I've just had my coffee, so I'm talkative, as you've experienced. And then as the day wears on, if you would have caught me, Brian, like at 4 p.m., I might have just been kind of like, I might have actually been paddleboarding because the sun is out today and we just got a
Which would make it interesting. It could be good conversation.
I would do that. If you ever want to do like a at sea interview, I'll be your guy for that.
I am down.
Let's rain check. We'll think of a good time for that.
Yes. And so, are you? I forgot to ask. Are you any plans to come out to the West Coast again?
It's funny. We're like flying all over the world, but not on the West Coast. We'll try for sure to get over there this year. I don't know when.
Cool. If you're anywhere within driving range, I'll definitely come out and. Ooh, maybe I could introduce you again.
Yeah, let's do that.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for your time again. I appreciate that. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And if you're new to the music of Trapper and his band, share this with others and get this new album. Swing by his website, buy something. This is what makes it easier for indie artists to survive these days. So go out there and buy something. Jump out on the road. Keep up with what Trapper's doing and see him if he's coming to your neck of the woods. Thank you all for listening, and keep your bags packed and join us on our next Journey to the Stage. And that is a wrap.
Done.
All right.